Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, October 18th, 2013. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Ready for a weekend here. I think everybody's taking a deep breath because the debt ceiling crisis has been solved. No, it hasn't, but that's what they're telling you. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. I'm probably going to get to clean up a lot of stories that were building up over this week in the talking points, and I didn't get to them because of all the other stuff that was going on. So we're going to be jumping around with a bunch of different stories here about a wide range of topics. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in with your comments. Of course, the Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 today. Keith Johnson from Activist Post will be our guest next Wednesday. Brandon Turbeville, also from Activist Post, will be joining us on Thursday talking about Syria and Egypt. Keith is probably going to be talking about gun rights and this push to once again try and disarm the American public, and the American public are digging their heels in. A little bit of a personal program note. As you're probably aware, I was a brief guest on Coast to Coast AM last week, and apparently they just got this amazing response, so they called me last night, and I'm going to be the guest on Coast to Coast AM radio next Tuesday night and for the entire 3-hour show. So it's just going to be George Noory and I talking about the Fed and the 11th Marble and the rush to war with Syria and wars and all the rest of it. I understand they'll be taking calls in the third hour if you want to call on in and yell and scream and call me bad names to a much larger audience here. Now, speaking of screaming bad names, Obamacare is turning into a disaster. It's already fodder for late-night comedy shows, and I'm willing to speculate that probably 5 to 10 years from now, Obamacare is what Obama is going to be remembered for. I mean, he's in his second term. He can't run for president again. He's worried about his legacy. This was going to be his flagship accomplishment to go down in the history books with. And it's turning into an absolute joke. And ever since we had John McAfee on the show yesterday talking about it, I've gotten a ton of emails and text messages from people who are familiar with the development of computer systems saying this thing is absolutely a complete joke. We're 2 weeks into this system and they still can't get it working right. And I'm in agreement with John McAfee. The system architecture is badly flawed, and that means they're not going to be able to patch it or make it work somehow. The shortest and least expensive solution is to trash what they've got now and start building from scratch, which means a year's delay at the very least. But Obama's pushing forward because he's going to be right even when he's wrong. And I got into an email discussion with somebody. This is almost reminiscent of the mistake that Stalin made regarding a phenomenon, or actually was more of a cult believing, called Lysenkoism, which had about as much scientific validity as human-caused global warming. But Lysenko was a big star, and he was touted as proof of Soviet scientific achievement, and his method of forced vernalization and inherited vernalization of crops led to some of the worst famines in the former Soviet Union, which is when they were coming to the United States and buying our surplus grain back when we actually had a surplus that we could sell here. So Obama, I mean, the longer he pushes on this, the more it's going to damage him, and whatever other agendas that he's got for the remainder of his term in the Oval Office are going to be completely overshadowed by this absolute monstrous disaster here. And the government is saying, oh, it's just a glitch, it's just a few problems, and, you know, it's bogged down because it's so popular and so many people are coming to that. And today we're finding out that people just logging in have dropped off. They've gotten frustrated, they've quit, they've gone away, and, of course, the IRS is out there rubbing their hands together and says, great, they didn't sign up, we can find them now. But they refuse to talk about the problems with the site. And Obama is pushing this bad position. He's literally hoisting on his own petard on this issue of Obamacare. The president has now boarded petard 1. and it is absolutely going to poison what is left of his term in office and his historical legacy. Now, let's look at some numbers. Population of the United States of America is about 330 million people, roughly translates to 100 million households. So far, 9.47 million people have just visited healthcare.gov, and that includes people like me who just tried to bring up the page, didn't get anywhere, and then quit. The number of people who visited the individual marketplace, 5.68 million. Out of that, roughly 15 million people who signed into the websites, only 3.72 million actually attempted to register. Out of that 3.72 million who tried to register, only 1 million actually succeeded in the registration. Out of those who successfully registered, only 271,000 were able to then log in, as opposed to the rest who were told, sorry, your data is damaged, you have to re-register and pick a new username because your old username is still in the system. 196,000 people began enrollment, and only 36,000 Americans out of 330 million actually completed the enrollment process. That is what a complete, unmitigated disaster Obamacare and its website have become. And there ought to be some really serious investigation into just how it was that this particular group got that contract. Originally bid at $80 million. The government is now admitting $200 million. Other sources are saying it went over $660 million. 3 years in development. And it looks like a high school software development project. Some kid in a basement typing away on an old Trash 80. You know that project that is calling for volunteers for a one-way trip to Mars to colonize the planet? More people have signed up for that than have signed up for Obamacare. That's how absurd this thing is. It's a complete disaster. Obama should have gone for that deal that the House of Representatives offered to simply delay Obamacare for 1 year while they get the problems out and raise the debt ceiling. But they're still out there pushing it, and apparently the bureaucrats that are supposed to be taking care of Obamacare have created nearly 12 million words of regulations to enforce Obamacare. Now, we know how horribly obfuscated the tax code is, and it's deliberate so that ordinary Americans can't find their way through it, can't figure out what it means. Creates a permanent class of navigators or experts to say, oh, this is what it means and this is what you're going to pay. And very often they're making mistakes. But it is extraordinarily obfuscated. It's impossible to get through. And obfuscation is often used to hide nefarious intent. And if that wasn't bad enough, the people who got all these millions and millions of dollars to build this software system didn't write it all. They got a public license data function from another company and just brought it in and used it, and they did not give credit to the original source, which is a violation of the copyright licensing agreement. So the Obamacare website it's a software pirate. It violated the licensing agreement for copyrighted software, which they got for free. All the millions of dollars going in, and they're going out and getting free stuff off the net to put it all together with. Now, the design firm that built Obamacare, as of today, has deleted all references to itself from the Obamacare website. Apparently, it's not the high point of their resume, and they're now sort of like pulling away and saying, we may have had something to do with it, but really, you don't need to know that. Oh, my goodness. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more about the economy after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media has had to pay attention to the Obamacare disaster. They were out there saying, oh, this is going to be great, it's going to be wonderful, and now we're 2 weeks in, and the corporate media is going to say, all right, this is a flustercluck, and we have to deal with it because it's all over the independent media, it's all over the blogs and websites, it's all over Republic Broadcasting, that this thing is an epic, epic, epic fail. Wall Street Journal is out there reporting that the insurance providers, the actual health insurance companies that were expecting trillions of dollars in new profits from their policies, the enrollment system is sending them absolute garbage data. And some of them are trying to correct it by hand manually. They're calling back to people and saying, this isn't working. What did you mean to put in here? Huge losses in time and manpower. This thing is not working at all. And the corporate media is saying, yeah, it's an issue. Out here in Hawaii, it was so bad, they literally blanked the data disks and said everybody else has to start all over again. And they're not going to fix this quickly, because the basic system architecture was badly designed. And anybody who's done large-scale software development knows that if that core architecture isn't right, there's no amount of money and programming talent you can put on it that's going to get it to work efficiently. So it's just a major debacle. And, of course, Obama's not going to back off and say, all right, we blew it. We know the mindset of people in Washington, D.C. They can never admit error or deception or fraud. It's somebody else's fault. That person over there, the opposing party, the GOP, sabotaged the computers. The GOP has hackers. Whatever they're going to say about this. The corporate media is also no longer carrying Obama's water about the debt ceiling deal. And they're coming out and saying the same thing that we've been saying, which is this didn't solve any problems. All they did was just patch it over and put it off till the beginning of next year because they want you all in a happy, contented mood for the Christmas shopping season. So you'll go out and max out those credit cards, buying a bunch of Christmas stuff here. And then come January, they say, all right, here are the problems. Now, little technical issue. If you go back and you look at that bill that ran through Congress and was signed by President Obama, there is no actual debt ceiling in it. It doesn't say we're raising the debt ceiling from X to Y. What it actually says is they have temporarily suspended the debt ceiling, which means between now and January, the government can borrow and spend as much as it wants because there is no more limit. And then come January, they say, well, how much do we owe? Well, that's got to be the new debt ceiling. And what this has sent to the rest of the world is this government cannot get its house in order. And that is a major problem because just raising the debt ceiling doesn't mean anything unless you can find somebody who is going to loan you some money. And if they rely entirely on the Federal Reserve, that's a problem because just cranking out new Federal Reserve notes or typing more numbers into a computer puts downward pressure on the dollar internationally at a time when much of the world is already looking to pull away from using the dollar. Finding other investors in other countries to invest in U.S. government debt, that's a real problem. Chinese rating agency just downgraded the U.S. debt. Standard & Poor's is hinting they might do it. And this is where that little tit for tat with the lawsuit, because Standard & Poor's said they were going to downgrade the U.S. government. The U.S. government turned around and sued them and said, how dare you that? Just like they put Egan Jones out of business. You can't say bad things about U.S. government debt. We are, by divine right, always AAA. No, they aren't. I wouldn't loan this government $1, even if I had the dollar to loan right now. But there is no debt ceiling in the debt ceiling deal. They just simply said, you don't have to worry about it. And so the government is now back in operation here. The Panda Cam is back. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. That should tell us that life is back to normal. I know the government shutdown is over because those emails about chemtrails and Planet X and fake Apollo moon landings, they started back up yesterday, just pouring into my email box. They must have been saving them up during the entire period of the shutdown because I got a flood of those things here. And we're seeing an article coming out of Money News where the Washington budget battle may force the Federal Reserve to delay their quantitative easing taper until somewhere deep in 2014. Oh, my goodness, we were going to taper, we were going to stop the bond buyback, and the gosh darn government shutdown just derailed that. Well, they're using the budget battle as a scapegoat. And that's all it is. Because the fact is that Wall Street and the federal government are now on life support. They're being kept alive by extreme measures, by they've got an IV stuck in their arm through which the Federal Reserve is pouring $85 billion of newly created money every single month. They're dependent on it. They can't pull the plug without killing the patients. And, of course, the life, meaning the money being pumped into D.C. and Wall Street, is taking life, meaning money, from the American people through runaway inflation. That $85 billion coming out of thin air every month has effects. It takes away purchasing power from the money you worked and earned and put in your pocket and put in your savings account and buried in the mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation. And that's why you're seeing prices at the supermarket go right through the roof. It's not like that loaf of bread is actually worth anything more. Your money is being made worth less by the fiscal policies of the Federal Reserve and the United States government, working hand in hand to enrich themselves at your expense. We're going to be down in Zimbabwe territory here, walking around with pieces of paper that say $100 trillion on them. And they'll be about as well respected in the world as the Zimbabwe notes, which are bought for, I think it's something like they cost $7 now. People frame them on the wall as a curio or something like that. Now, the budget deal did not go through completely clean. There was inevitably special favors and pork barrel that went in there. Kentucky, as part of their deal to go along with this budget, got themselves a $2.9 billion earmark for this dam project on the Ohio River being developed by the URS Corporation and Construction Management Company. And this is way up from the original $775 million that this project was supposed to cost. So they got their money, they got their deal out of the budget deal. They're taking money away from food stamps, they're taking money away from child support programs, but these pork barrel projects keep on going. Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee said it was absolutely necessary that we preserve these $160 million in contracts to our cronies and supporters. I hope they're doing a better job than the contractors on the Obamacare website here. Frank Lautenberg's widow received a $174,000 payout because her husband just passed away. This is, I think, roughly the equivalent of 1 year's salary, just in case you were wondering how much these Congress critters are getting paid. And the reason this is absolutely obscene at a time when they're cutting food stamp money is the Lautenbergs are worth an estimated $60 million. She doesn't need the money. I can't even imagine what $174,000 in one lump would even look like. But to her, it's loose change they found under the couch cushions. Now, we've been talking a lot about the NSA spying and its legitimacy, which, of course, there is none. Clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. And the NSA is still out there spying, saying, well, America's filled with terrorists, and that's why we have to spy on all of you. Now, we've already proved with our NSA challenges that real terrorists and real criminals can conceal their communications from the NSA. But it just as a note, how many terrorists does the NSA think there's actually in the country? We'll have the answer for that when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And Joe, I'm sorry I missed in our little text window that you were waiting on the line. If you want to call on back, we'll go to you just as soon as you call on in here. Now, we're talking about the NSA, which is spying on every single American and a lot of people around the world, all of it illegal, all of it unconstitutional, and they justify it on the claim that they are fighting terrorism. Now, they were caught lying when they said that they had thwarted some 57 separate terror incidents by being able to spy on Americans. And then they had to back off and admit that, actually, no, there was really only one, and that one was thwarted by ordinary existing conventional police work. It's one of the reasons why the head of the NSA is now stepping down and is going to be replaced, because he's now damaged goods. So the NSA is still out there saying, we've got to watch all of you because there are terrorists out there. Well, it turns out that according to the NSA's own numbers, there are only about 600 terror suspects inside the United States of America. Now, being an efficiency-oriented kind of person, if these 600 people are real terror suspects, go ahead and spy on them. You know, and then when you catch them in a crime, go ahead and prosecute them. But what this means is that for every one terror suspect, And remember, they're suspects. Doesn't mean they've actually done anything. It's just the NSA has a reason to think that they might be thinking bad thoughts about the government. For every one terror suspect on the NSA's list, the NSA is spying on 624,297 completely innocent, law-abiding Americans. Even for a government project, this is hideously inefficient. And they're just drowning in completely useless, pointless data, trying to correlate something out of all that mess. Now, when you add data to a project, that's linearly additive. Twice as much data, twice as much room. But when you try and correlate that information, mathematically it's called an unlimited expansion. It's like that old story about taking a chessboard and putting 1 grain of rice on the first square, 2 grains of rice on the second, 4 grains of rice on the third, and by the time you get to the end of the chessboard, you have used up the entire crop of rice in India. And so that's the reality of the NSA. For every one person the NSA thinks might actually be a terror suspect, they are spying on 624,297 law-abiding, innocent Americans, which includes their ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, romantic rivals, and the rest of that. Now, over in Syria, the chemical weapons inspectors have reached the halfway mark in inspecting Syria's chemical weapons, taking inventory, getting ready for transporting them and destroying them. And so far, they have received full cooperation from the government of Syria, which stands in stark contrast for when they approached the hired mercenary army, posing as the Syrian rebels, and asked to see their chemical weapons, which has been reported numerous times they have and have used. And the rebels are saying, no, you have no business coming in and looking at our chemical weapons because our chemical weapons are good and Assad's chemical weapons are bad. And it is a reminder that it was never the Syrian government that was the problem. It was the hired mercenaries. And that's another epic fail by this government, who actually really thought that you, the American people, are such morons, they could come on out here and say, yes, Assad has gassed his own people. We must make war. And internationally, the media in other countries are, in fact, speaking with high praise of the American people who stood up in defiance and denounced this lie. So the times, they are a-changing. Now, there has been an attack on the foreign compound in Kabul. There was a car bomb and basically other attacks at the Green Village compound used by foreigners on the outskirts of Kabul. At huge amount of noise. No immediate details of who was behind the attack, but let's be honest, it sure helps the U.S. government sell the idea that they've got to stay after 2014. How very convenient for John Kerry at a time when the installed government of Afghanistan is saying, well, we'd kind of like you guys to go here, and then boom, see, we have to stay now. Apparently, back in Syria, there have been bombings of Christian churches involving bombs that are inserted into what are called the confessional boxes of Syrian churches by these Western-backed, Israeli-backed hired mercenaries. So they're basically trying to kick things up there because they still want their war with Syria. That whole idea of Assad gassed his own people, that cratered, so they're looking for some other way they can get this thing going. And they're just thrashing around here. Now, over in Iran, things are rapidly evolving there because the European Court of Justice just overturned and unfroze the European Union-Iran sanctions. When the U.S. came out and said, Israel says we must sanction Iran, so we will sanction Iran, and Europe said, oh, yes, of course, if Israel wants it, we must do it. And now their own Central Court of Justice, their equivalent of the United States Supreme Court, said, you have no basis in law for it. Sanctions are nonviolent warfare. They are designed to inflict harm on another country to coerce it to change its political views, which, by the way, is the definition of terror in the USA Patriot Act here. Meanwhile, Israel's still out there racing on a busted flush. They're trying to just find some way they can get Iran to be demonized, and now they're screaming that the reason Israel can never make peace with the Palestinians is it's all Iran's fault. It's all Iran's fault because every time Israel gives up any territory, the Iranians move in. Actually, I thought it was the Palestinians. Go silly. And Israel's out there saying Iran doesn't want peace. They're the dominant power in the region, which is complete and utter nonsense. Iran does not have nuclear weapons, despite Israeli claims to the contrary. Israel does have nuclear weapons. And by the way, they're back to trying to reinforce the ambiguity policy, saying maybe we do and maybe we don't, but you won't know until you tick us off. And again, Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years, and stands in stark contrast to Israel and the United States, which these days cannot go for 6 months without bombing or drone striking or invading somebody. By the way, speaking of the drones, the United Nations has basically come out and declared the U.S. drone strikes into foreign countries are a violation of international law, which we already knew. When you send weapons of war into somebody else's country without their permission and you start killing people, that is an act of war, if not an act of terror. And for every one so-called terror suspect who has not had their day in court, for whom no evidence of wrongdoing has been presented before a jury of their peers, for every one of those guys they get, these drone strikes are taking out an average of 50 innocent bystanders. And by the way, according to Edward Snowden, the NSA is coming up with a lot of the names on Obama's little death list of people that we must bomb because they might sort of maybe somehow be thinking bad things about the United States of America. Well, when you live in one of these countries and you're just going about your daily life and you're down in the marketplace in the middle of the village and there's a huge blinding flash and giant explosion and people that you have known your entire life are in bloody shreds at your feet, yeah, you're not going to remain entirely cheerful. And when you see Made in the USA on all that shrapnel, you're going to know who your anger should be directed at. And so this whole drone idea is a complete, utter piece of nonsense. We're going to go on drone striking you until you stop getting angry over the drone strikes. Seems to be the thinking behind this. Now, getting over to Israel, because they've reached a state in their propaganda where if lives were not on the line, it would be laughable. And I'm talking about their response to the disappearing Palestine ads that have shown up in cities like Vancouver. And all those ads show is the shrinking size of Palestine since Israel became a nation. And these ads pointedly do not mention Israel. It simply says Palestine is shrinking away. And of course, Israel's supporters are just up in an uproar. How can you put that out there? It's anti-Semitic. It's supporting terror. And it's all this other brouhaha. And so Israel's supporters came up with their own counter poster, which is out there showing the Jewish loss of land from 1000 BCE to 2013. And they start out with one pane from 1000 BCE that shows the ancient Jewish kingdom. Then in 1920 it shows the Jewish homeland. And then today, State of Israel. And the point they're trying to make is we're the victims. We're the ones who are losing the land that we're supposed to have. And it's already failing because much of the information in there is absolutely, completely bogus. And when we come back from this next commercial break, I'm going to go into detail about why this latest piece of propaganda from Israel is falling on deaf ears and blind eyes. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about this propaganda battle that we're seeing here in the United States of America, which began with a poster that went up on buses all over Vancouver. It's also appeared pretty much all the way across the United States of America. It involves a graphic we have used many times at our website that simply shows the loss of Palestinian land from 1946 to the present day. And these posters pointedly do not mention Israel as the reason. It simply says disappearing Palestine. And of course, this got all Israel supporters knickers in a twist, and they're out there screaming you're an anti-Semite. And they've countered with a poster showing the Jewish loss of land from 1000 BCE to 2013. And it's 3 panels. The ancient Jewish kingdom, 1000 BCE, the Jewish homeland of 1920, hang on to that one, and then of course the State of Israel today, which is quite a bit smaller. But they're really reaching back there, and it's very weak because they've gone back to biblical times of myth and legend to make the claim that they are, as usual, the victims. We're the ones losing our home. Now, In 1000 BCE, the kingdoms of the Israelites, and by the way, it wasn't a single country. It was the 12 tribes, and each had their own little territory. And it did cover a large portion of the eastern Mediterranean, but the map on this new poster shows it being a little bit larger than the map over at the World History Timeline shows it. Okay. But you need to understand something. Israel was wiped off that map by the Assyrians in 740 BCE. Then Babylon conquered the land in 597 BCE. By 538 BC, that region was conquered by the Persians, then by the Seleucids, then by the Romans, then by the Muslim Caliphate, then by the Ayyubid Sultanate, then by the Mamluk Sultanate, then by the Ottoman Empire. And following the breakup of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, a separate and distinct Palestine appeared on the maps, but no Israel. Israel has not existed as a distinct nation since before 500 BCE until 1948. So the map showing the extent of the ancient Israelite kingdoms at 1000 BCE is completely irrelevant. And those Israelite kingdoms were populated by the descendants of the biblical Israelites, Hebrews, Hyksos, those tribes. And present-day Israel is populated overwhelmingly by Ashkenazi, who are not descended from the biblical Hebrews or Hyksos or Israelites. They are descendants of Khazars in Central Asia who were converted to Judaism in 800 AD. Now that map showing the Israel homeland in 1920 is a complete and total fabrication. The Jewish homeland in 1920 at that time was an ambition of the Zionists. It was not a fact on the ground. If you look at maps of that part of the world all through the 1930s, Israel is not there. It's all shown as Palestine. And so they're out there just trying to just push this propaganda that they're the victims and that we shouldn't feel bad for the Palestinians whose lands are being stolen by the Zionists. And in this age of the Internet, people are able to go out and double-check these claims being made by Israel, like Iran's nuclear bombs or Iraq's nuclear bombs, or who really blew up all those British and American assets in Egypt in the 1950s. Technology has caught up with governments' willingness to lie blatantly to achieve their ends, and it just doesn't work any longer. And I guess Israel's throwing a tantrum that they want to go back to the world where they could just say anything, the American corporate media would obediently regurgitate it all over your head, and you would believe it, and you would support Israel as it goes out and takes pieces of other people's land. By the way, we're getting an interesting story coming out of Ex-Republic TV where apparently the current head of the Rothschild banking clan is predicting that they will have an international currency within 5 years. And the problem with that is it's going to be just like the euro, just like the Federal Reserve note. It will be borrowed at interest from the Rothschild banks. They're going for it all. Global dominion. Let me create and issue the planet's money, and I care not who makes the laws. Now, back down here in the real world, it's amazing. We're in 2013, and already they're starting to maneuver and campaign for 2016, and Hillary Clinton is out there proclaiming that she was the one who backed the raid that got Osama bin Laden, and Joe Biden had nothing to do with it. Because obviously both Biden and Hillary Clinton are going to be going into that 2016 primary season, and Hillary's trying to basically leapfrog over him right now. She's obviously running for president. Now, I think Hillary should probably be very, very careful linking herself to that Osama raid, since more and more Americans are finding out the real Osama bin Laden died back in 2001 of natural causes. And all the Osamas since then were manufactured propaganda fakes. When whoever they got at Abbottabad, it was somebody else. It wasn't Osama bin Laden, which is why they had to ditch that body at sea and flooded the Internet with a bunch of poorly done, faked photographs trying to convince us all that, yes, they got the supervillain of the 21st century. And that didn't work out very well. So Hillary, I don't know, she's getting bad advice from her handlers already. She should not align herself with that raid that got Osama bin Laden, because by the time 2016 gets here, the majority of Americans are going to know it is a joke. We're going to take a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing fine.
Hearing about J.P. Morgan Chase and a few of the other too big to fail, the too big to jail banks, and putting in these capital controls on our money, our fruits of our labors, and hearing some of the other broadcasters saying it's futile resist, they're going to do what they want. How do you think we, the people, should respond if the banks are going to try to impose these capital controls on our money to sort of like save their own hind end?
Well, I'm going to say the same thing I've been saying all along. You should have no more money in the bank than you need to meet your immediate obligations, and you should have the rest under your own control at home. And by the way, there's another article we put up at whatreallyhappened.com that more and more Americans are doing exactly that. They're keeping their checking accounts at a bare minimum. They're closing their savings account. They're taking their money home. They're buying physical silver and gold, or they're swapping it for other currencies that are doing well against the U.S. dollar. Because if the money is in your pocket, if it's in your home, they can put all the capital controls they want on it. It's not going to affect you. Who it's going to affect are those Americans who still naively believe that the banking system is operating correctly and would never, ever, ever, ever harm their customers and depositors, even though we've already seen that happen in Cyprus. They're talking about doing it in Greece. It's already written into the finance plan for Canada for next year. The attitude. You need to understand something. Under this private central banking system that issues the public currency as a loan at interest, in their mind, it's their money. It may be in your pocket. It may be in the treasury of your company, but they see it as still their money that you have merely borrowed. And that's why they feel they have the arrogance to simply say, well, since it's our money anyway, we have a right to come into your private life and tell you what you should do with the money that you borrowed from us. And that is a very, very dangerous loss of freedoms. When we had the government issuing the public currency as a public utility, and when it was based on value, once that money was in your pocket, there wasn't a thing the government or the bankers could do to change its value or manipulate it or force you to spend it on something. That was your money and that was your freedom. And we lost that with the Federal Reserve System.
Well, the thing is, they don't talk about what happened in Iceland or what happened in Ukraine.
Or what's happening in Hungary.
Yeah, they don't talk about, these bankers are not invincible.
Well, they don't want you uppity American slave. They don't want you American slaves to get uppity ideas. That's a bad thought, the idea of jailing bankers and taking the public currency back to a public utility. That is heresy. You're not allowed to know that that's a possibility out there. And that's exactly why.
This is not coming from the mainstream media. This is coming from our own side.
Which is coming from our own side?
Yeah, well, like I say, it's futile resist, and we're just going to have to roll over and take back the country another day type of thing.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying take back the country. I'm saying, watch your stopwatches because it's all coming crashing down anyway. We got to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and commercials. We'll be back with some more stories from this past week after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to be spending the rest of today catching up on a bunch of stories that accumulated over the last week that I couldn't get to. CNN is saying the only affordable way of stopping global warming is to depopulate the planet, meaning you icky-poo humans. Now, I hereby invite CNN, or anyone else who thinks the planet's human population needs to be reduced, to lead by example. Climb to the top of that very tall building that they work in down there in Atlanta and leap off. The benefit of your generous action will be doubled if you hit a media executive or a politician on the way down. Now, the fact of the matter is that human contribution to climate is actually rather small compared to volcanoes, undersea thermal vents, solar activity. Carbon dioxide is demonized because they can blame that on human activity and tax it, which is what this global warming thing is all about. It's just another cash grab. But the reality is this idea of, depopulating the planet. I get really sick of these environmental extremists who see nature as somehow separate from the human population. That a dam built by beavers for beavers' purposes is somehow part of nature, but a dam built by humans for humans' purposes is not. And I think a lot of these environmental extremists have a great deal of self-hate. that they direct at the rest of the human population, because I am part of nature. I evolved on this planet. So did you. It is our birthright because of billions of years of evolution. We are tool users. Just like many other animals, our tools are much more sophisticated. Of course, this computer is part of nature. Your computer is part of nature. The electric lights are part of nature because we are part of nature. And we shouldn't be drawing a line saying, here is nature and it's wonderful, and over here are the icky-poo humans that we have to get rid of. One of the last books that Tom Clancy wrote himself, and I think it was the original Rainbow Six, involved a group of ultra-rich, ultra-liberal environmental activists who just decided for themselves that the world would be a lot better if 99% of the humans were gone and they would get to just enjoy the planet for themselves, return to nature, not counting those palatial survival palaces that they bought for themselves. And there are a lot of people like that who somehow see themselves, because of their wealth and power and privilege, that they're not part of the common clay, and wouldn't it be nice to get rid of the common clay? And don't get me wrong, I'm very concerned about the environment. I very much like nature. I believe in the wise use of resources. I don't believe in using political, environmental scare tactics for political purposes, obviously. And I understand that there is a human population problem, and there always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. But I think there are technological solutions to care for the human population. It's just the money junkies don't want to spend the money. Just cheaper to cull the herd. Get those useless eaters out of here. And I have no patience for anybody who is screaming about human overpopulation who is not willing to do it to take care of the problem themselves in their own family. It's always somebody else who has to be sterilized and go without children. It's always some other group of people that have to be culled out and killed off. And I have zero patience for that. Boeing is back in the news again. Apparently over in India, an Air India Dreamliner was in flight when an 8-foot panel peeled off the fuselage of the Dreamliner. It's just this aircraft is a disaster, and Boeing's already ducking the blame, saying, oh, well, we subcontracted foreign companies to save money, and it's all their fault. And Boeing is another example of a company that used to carry the banner for American products being the best in the world. I mean, the 737 is the most popular airliner in the world. But this Dreamliner, the money junkies got hold and said, well, we're going to build this plane and we're going to build it cheap so we make more money, and we'll just send out the electronics to these people and blah, blah. Nothing but problems. Nothing but problems. Now, giving a little bit of a nod to Phyllis Schlafly's commentary at the top of the hour about the gun grabbers going out for it again, trying to literally propagandize our children to react in horror at anything that looks like a gun, drawing of a gun, Pop-Tart shaped like a gun, little plastic toy guns, pictures of guns on computers. Oh, it's horrible, you shouldn't look at that. And we're getting another story here. This is out of dailycaller.com. Where over in North Carolina, school administrators staged another one of these surprised, simulated terror attacks where masked gunmen just ran through the school firing off blank ammunition. Now, they're calling it a drill or a civic experiment or whatever. It is a brainwashing tactic to traumatize children emotionally and link that emotional trauma to the image of a gun so they won't grow up and want to go out duck hunting or target shooting. That's what all of these little operations in the school are. When you have a fire drill, they tell you ahead of time, we're going to have a fire drill. And when you hear the fire bell, this is what you will do. And you hear the fire bell and you do what you're told to do, and that's a fire drill. They don't set fire to the school and then let you figure it out for yourselves. But these so-called terror drills in the elementary schools are all about traumatizing the children. So they will never be able to look at a gun without feeling fear and horror. And they'll run home and say, Mommy, the guns are bad. Call your congressman and tell him to repeal the Second Amendment. Now, as a little side note, we talk about Hawaii and tourism out here an awful lot, and our tourism is really in terrible shape because the TSA has just convinced everybody to go to Mexico. But there is one aspect of Hawaii's tourism that is still doing very well, and we actually got a nod from Forbes magazine recently about gun tourism. And they were talking about the Waikiki Gun Club. And the first time I saw it, it just kind of struck me as weird until I realized what was going on. And this is down in the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center, right next to the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. It's right in the middle of Waikiki, and it is this very glitzy chrome and glass gun range. And their business is primarily with tourists from countries who are not allowed to have guns in their homeland, like Japan. Now, Japan is real big on these plastic toy guns that look just like the real ones, the airsoft guns and everything. But they never get to handle a real gun. And so a lot of Japanese tourists, when they finally get through being fondled by TSA, they'll go right down to the Waikiki Gun Club so that for once in their life they can actually pick up and fire a gun. And they have instructors down there. They hand it very safely. To the best of my knowledge, there has never been any kind of an accident at the Waikiki Gun Club. If they're not sure you're really able to handle a gun well, they actually have guns that are on these cable and pulley systems to make sure that you're not going to point them away from the intended target. That's how careful they are. But it is a big part of our tourism business. Now, we do have another public gun range over at Cocoa Head. It's actually owned by the Honolulu Police Department, but they allow other people to come on down there and do some shooting. There are some other private gun ranges here. I do Cocoa Head because I shoot black powder, and the indoor gun ranges don't like it when you do that because of all the smoke, even though I use Pyrex here. We were talking the other day about this situation in Cleveland. Last year there was a car chase, lasted 23 minutes, and at the end of it, 60 police officers fired 137 bullets into the car and killed its 2 occupants. And it was viewed as a little bit of an overreaction. And apparently most of those officers received temporary suspensions. No manslaughter charges, no murder charges, no firings, no terminations. They get to go home and sit in front of the TV for a couple of weeks, is it. Another little story coming out of the airlines. Apparently a federal air marshal was arrested yesterday in Nashville after he was caught while on duty, sitting in the airplane, supposedly protecting the passengers from terrorism, and he was using his cell phone to take pictures of the skirts of female passengers. Wonderful people they hire for these well-paid government jobs. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go to the phones, I'm just noticing on Fox News they're making a big deal about this high-rise residential unit in Los Angeles is on fire. It's burning. It's burning. Still standing. I'm sure somebody out there is saying, please collapse. We got to shut up those people about World Trade Center 7. We need this building to come down. Don't think it's going to happen. One more story before we go to the phones here. Apparently, and this is over at 12160, an autistic child who was in school got suspended for drawing a cartoon bomb. Talk about this zero-tolerance idea. Can't draw a bomb, can't draw this, can't do this. You will draw tractors and you will draw movie stars, but you won't draw anything else like that. And he gets suspended. And contrast that with Benjamin Netanyahu, who drew a cartoon bomb at the United Nations, and all he got was laughed at. We're going to go to the phones here now. Steve in New York. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Aloha, Mike. How's everything?
Doing fine. What's on your mind?
Actually, it's pretty interesting. Like, back in the day when I was very young, they were offering people money to call radio talk shows.
They still do.
And what they usually, they get these young guys, the people, they say, okay, they bring, I'm not making up, to bring in, and they say, okay, they ask questions, they interview for a while, and they say, well, we're going to pay you to call on talk shows, and I refused to do it. I said, I wouldn't do it. I said, this is crazy. And then I told some other people, I said, this is easy money. You should have done it. But
okay. I misunderstood what you're talking about. You're talking about talk shows that were trying to build their audience, and they weren't getting a lot of calls, and so they would actually.
Well, they have like fake. Most of these, like the Handy Show is fake callers. Rush Limbaugh has fake callers. A lot of the callers are just, and Mark Levin is notoriously a lot of fake callers coming in. Like a lot of these stage calls. Yeah,
there's nothing new about that. When I was first involved in radio many years ago, briefly, that was kind of a known thing that was going on here. But I thought you meant the people who are paid by enemies of the talk show host to call in and talk about fake Apollo moon landings and crap like that.
They have actually like different different like what you call it, someone to promote the host or promote the agenda, or there's certain PR groups or think tanks, ideas of a think tank. Like, for example, the Heritage Foundation has its own agenda. They push this lie, this nonsense lie to the public about their whole agenda, and Mark Levin promotes, and they wrote this. They have like different, like, there's so many think tanks just designed to manipulate the public, like Eddie Bernays did.
Virtually every large public relation firm will sell that as a service. If you're a talk show host and you're out there pushing
Hill and
Knowlton is one of the biggest ones out there. I think Davies Communication, if they're still in business, they used to do it.
And the sad thing, the American people are just so easy to fool. I mean, they buy into the silliest ideas. They pay for things they don't really have to pay for free. They're basically free. I mean, there's a lot of the post is.
Okay, let me cut in here. Let me cut in a little bit here. My show. And since I'm not paying you anything, I can be rude to you. This comes under the heading of what's called grassroots lobbying. And lobbyists who approach members of the government are required by law to identify themselves as such. But lobbying organizations can go out and lobby the public without identifying themselves, and that includes people who are paid to show up at town meetings to push a particular agenda, call into radio shows, get onto blogs and post the stuff. They're not required to identify themselves as public relations operatives, but yes, it is a very common facet of American culture that when you're listening to one of these talk shows, Washington Insider, Washington Report, or whatever it is, that a lot of the people calling into that show are in fact paid to do that, to push a particular agenda. We actually documented one time where the Obama administration was literally putting out casting calls in Backstage magazine for people to show up for what were ostensibly supposed to be town hall meetings, so that they could load the audience with people who were paid to be there, who would applaud at the appropriate moment and say the appropriate things. It's all very controlled. It's all just these gigantic theater operations.
Kevin Trudeau, the infomercial king, he's a genius of manipulation. He came up with this idea, this fake secret society thing, like a self-help organization. He took like few self-help books, charges like he didn't raise a few self, like 4 or 5 of them, charged like $1,200 going up a year membership for just and self-help, just like all this nonsense. He always comes up with this little scam. Then he's facing jail time. It was in the news because they say you have to pay $80 million to somebody for fraudulent information.
He needs to get the Scientologist lawyers to get him out of trouble, because they've been doing the same thing for decades.
He was like that was for a different scam he did, but like he faces like he also initially started. He did credit card. He was in jail. Actually, was in jail for a few years for a credit card fraud. He stole a credit card number. Some people it was mega memory stuff, and he was in jail for a few years for stealing credit card numbers. And he's caught like all, and he's basically so. But like all this, the public is so easily manipulated. They buy these this nonsense.
Well, not anymore. Not anymore. I'm going to let you go here because it sounds like you're about to hyperventilate and pass out, and I don't want you cracking your head on the edge of the table there. But the public used to be very easy to manipulate, but obviously that isn't working any longer, and that's one of the reasons the corporate media is losing advertising revenues and they're losing audience, and public relations firms are reporting they're having a harder time going out there and planting phony commenters on blogs or phony callers to radio shows or even TV talk shows, because now the American people understand it's there. These tactics only work if the American people aren't aware it's being done. But once the American public realizes that public relations firms play these kind of tricks, their guard is up. And I don't think the American people are anywhere near as trusting and naive and believing in government and corporate media as they were back in the 1950s and 1960s. And the sooner the government and corporate media accepts that reality and adapts to it, the better we're all going to be. But, it just gets really crazy out there. We're going to switch to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hear they also pay manic babblers to veer off on tangents to suck up time.
You may be right.
You say that humans are tool makers.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps many are. Some are just tools, however. There are a great many who are merely tools. But the whole environmental thing, man in the environment thing that you're talking about, dams, it's been a long time since beavers have taken major rivers and dammed them up several times down their length, so as to really screw up the flow of the river, like with the Colorado.
Now, wait a minute. Have you ever studied what happens to the local environment when a beaver builds a dam? Because it does divert the water flow, and it will turn the surrounding land into marshland. And so do not...
I'm not saying it's not a problem. Oh, no, that's not what I meant.
All right.
I was concurring with you that it's hard to define moderation. Like for example, the Colorado used to be a raging cold torrent where it emptied out into the Gulf of California, but it's down to a warm trickle that's really changed the whole estuary and everything down there at the bottom. So I'm just saying with all our mass scale and our technology, we are somewhat challenged in defining moderation in the application of that stuff. That's all I was saying.
Well, we don't see moderation in nature. We see, all other life forms grabbing what they want when they want it without a regard to others around them, and I would hope as an aspect of the so-called superior human intelligence that we would be a little bit more altruistic. But yes, it's true that just as a beaver dam will alter the downstream terrain and water flow, so do human dams, and especially if the rivers involve cross-national borders, it can get contentious, as we're seeing already between Egypt and this other country, I forget which one it was, that's getting ready to build a new dam even further upstream on the Nile, which is going to certainly harm Egypt. We know that Israel and Lebanon are still fighting over where the water in the Litani River is supposed to go. We know there's even a dispute here in the U.S. involving Georgia and Tennessee over exactly where their state border is relative to a river that they both covet. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Joe in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You were talking about dams that beavers make, right?
Yes.
There was a documentary made, I think, around 1986.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Last Train Across Canada. And there was a branch that went up north in Canada to the sea up there near Russia. Well, they had a guy on that train. His job, he was beaver patrol, right? They'd have one beaver would make a dam, and it would actually flood the track so bad that the train would derail. That's what one beaver can do with one beaver dam. So you can look it up on the Internet. I think they have the whole thing posted. Last Train Across Canada. I think Gordon Lightfoot does some of the music on it, but I just had to call in about that when you were talking about the dams.
Well, look at all the constructions by humans that interfere with, other animals. And I'm not going to say turnabout is fair play here. What I would say is that probably whoever was laying the rail right of way was not as sensitive to the topography as they should have been. In terms of, obviously, there was some kind of a river or creek already there that they probably should have been thinking elevation. Probably what it was is some money junkie said, we don't need to build this up on a trestle. But yeah, and obviously destroying that beaver dam is going to be essential to keeping the railroad open. But again, getting back to this self-hate that we see in the environmental extremists, where they think a beaver dam is a part of nature that should be left alone, but human dams, are somehow an affront. It's complete nonsense. All life forms alter their environment around them. All life forms have an impact on the planet. And, again, I am part of nature, and so are you, and that is just the way it is. Joe, we're going to let you go. We're going to get another phone call from Anonymous, calling from a not-to-be-stated location. And what is on your mind today?
Hey, Mike.
I'm glad you realized who you were.
Well, I can't imagine there are that many anonymous callers, but anyway, I work in show business, as you know, and as I'm sure you're well aware that, show business is a lot of fakery and trickery to just, kind of wow people and everything. And I have no problem with that aspect of things. But something that's been eating me for a long time, and I worked on an episode of the Katie Couric show some months back. And it was related to the whole Sandy Hook thing. Mm-hmm. And we did a remote segment in the town hall in Newtown, Connecticut. And it was basically a lot of prominent people of Newtown, Connecticut, parents of people who had lost children. And in an effort to keep the narrative on focus, what they did was they had a casting call and they hired actors who were basically, because part of the segment was a Q&A to kind of how do we go on, how do we move on from here and everything. And as you can imagine, it was a horrific thing. There were, it was heartbreaking. There were parents who had lost children who were grief-stricken and angry. And, there were multiple times where they had to stop production to kind of get people kind of under control and things. So in the Q&A, to keep the narrative on point, they had actors who had come from a casting call who had scripted questions to try and just it was an ABC crew that I was a part of, and I just was dumbfounded that it was just, and obviously when you're on a set, it's a closed set, so there's nobody from the outside there. But this is sad. This has just bothered me ever since, and I just figured your show would be a good forum to just kind of like. No,
I understand. I understand what you're saying there. Now, a lot of people sometimes point to my past career, as grounds to suspect what Rivero is saying. But obviously, I worked in the entertainment side of media. When I made a dinosaur tap dance down the stage, everybody in the audience knew it wasn't real. I wasn't trying to convince them that it was real. But we do know, we have seen so much fakery coming out of the corporate media. And getting back to Newtown, there was that video of this guy who was supposed to be the father of one of the dead children, and he comes out the door and he's laughing and checking, and he's ready to go, and he goes, and you just see him do the breathing exercise and trying to get down to looking upset and everything, and it was just, it was all stage managed and it was all theater. And while I don't have a problem with special effects or visual effects or fakery, as an entertainment, obviously, I have a serious moral qualm with things that are faked that are presented as real, whether it's Katie Couric on her show, CNN live feeds from Baghdad, which turn out to be green screen, and they're actually someplace else where they're safe. I have a real problem with a lot of the shows we're starting to see on the so-called educational channels, whether it was the Mermaids one, Megalodon. We saw one last night that was a mockumentary about, the rise of zombies in America, and it was being presented as if this was actually happening, and I think it's very dishonest. And I think maybe this is being done to deliberately confuse Americans so they're not sure what's real and what isn't, to make it easier to bamboozle them. But I think the actual result is Americans are backing off and saying, wow, we can't trust anything coming out of corporate media and government these days, which is a healthy reaction. Absolutely. But
well, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I honestly was not there, and I'm very reluctant to kind of put my 2 cents in on something that I've not personally witnessed. Our gaffer was a local guy, and he knew some of the parents that were there. And my heart went out to him because he had to obviously sit there and watch all the feeds and sit through there. Some of us were able to kind of break away while things were kind of unfolding. But so people did lose children there.
Oh yeah, there was a real Well, I mean, now they're tearing the whole school down. The contractors who are doing the demolition have all had to sign confidentiality agreements. They've got a huge cordoned area off so that the public can't actually look at what's going on here. I mean, it reeks of cover-up. It's like what they did down in Waco, where they literally bulldozed 6 inches of soil off along with all the wreckage and took it away and buried it in an undisclosed location. It reeks of absolute fraud. And it was another fraud. They were trying to have another mass shooting that they could blame on the guns, and they're trying desperately to conceal the link between mass shootings and these prescription antidepressants we were talking about. The Connecticut Assistant District Attorney is on videotape, and he's going on there, well, even if in this one case, Adam Lanza's antidepressants triggered his behavior, that's not important information for the public to know because they might stop taking their medications. And, of course, there are thousands of these cases. Yeah, they're protecting the pharmaceutical industry profits. They're demonizing the guns. It's all perception management and the manufacture of consent. And they just don't realize these tactics don't work anymore with a skeptical American population. Okay?
Say, Mike, I wish I could put my name on this, but honestly, if I did, I would never work in this industry ever again, and I know that.
Been there, done that, don't want the T-shirt. I've been through it twice. I got blacklisted back in 1994 when I went public on Vince Foster, and I got blacklisted again a couple of years ago after I'd rebuilt my career here in Hawaii. And at this point, I'm perfectly content doing what I'm doing because I think I'm actually contributing more to the world right now than simply another, special effects extravaganza, in the movie theaters. All right, we're going to switch over.
I agree with you. And just one last point. I'll tell you, when I first got in this business, I never ever had to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. And now it seems like every third job I'm on, I have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I do the whole range of stuff. So that just kind of shows you how kind of scared people are that the truth is going to get out there. So anyway, thanks for taking my call, Mike, and thanks for keeping my name quiet. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I understand. I mean, there have been so many times over the years I wish I'd used a pseudonym when I went public on Vince Foster, but I was naive and trusting back then that, hey, I'm seeing evidence of a murder. See something, say something. Look, the FBI is manufacturing evidence, in what appears to be a murder, and my career just evaporated. And that's kind of what got me going on here. We're going to switch over to Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. Hey, in regards to your last caller, I was just going to say, it sounds very familiar with what they're doing in Hollywood as Obama's town hall meetings, and that's it. And I hope you keep your career here because you're doing a great job and a great service. Thank you very much.
Well, they can't blacklist me because I'm not in their business anymore. They don't have anything I actually want anymore, and so I'm kind of immune to that kind of stuff right now. But yeah, like I said, we actually found in Backstage Magazine where they were holding a casting call for people to come in and be Obama's town hall meeting, pretending to be just plain folk, to bamboozle the just plain folk. And it's amazing how much of Wag the Dog that movie turns out to actually be the way these things get done. I think it was a very brilliant screenplay and a very entertaining movie. Stellar cast on that. If you haven't seen it, you need to get it. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back with more news. Top of the hour, Lady Claire will be joining us. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Before we go back to the phones here, it's kind of an interesting story coming out of Indiana, where somebody had a digital billboard showing President Obama with a Hitler-style mustache. And apparently that billboard was taken down earlier this week, which kind of sort of proves the point they were making, if you think about it. We're going to go back to the phones here. Jerry in Chicago. Aloha. Jerry, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Jerry, going once? Going twice? Okay, I guess he dropped. Let's switch over to Nick in Japan. Ohio gozaimasu?
Yeah, Jerry dropped. Ohio gozaimasu.
Okay, desu ka?
Well, it's kind of early in the morning. The brain machinery isn't operating correctly, but...
I'm sorry. I keep forgetting about that huge expanse of water between where you are and where I am. So what's on your mind today?
Well, yeah, I'd like to venture a theory, and please be patient with me. But I think the only reason that Barack Obama has not been impeached is because Americans are locked into this state of institutional racism. And what I mean by this, everyone I meet, my family, my friends, I just don't think that they have this vast body of water between them where they can just they can see. They don't have a vantage point. And, I mean, everyone I talk with, they say, well, the state of the economy, it's not really Barack Obama's fault. He inherited the problem, if it's some sort of genetic abnormality or something like that, right? And so I think if Barack Obama was not a black man, I think he would be out on his derriere. If you look at the articles of impeachment that saw Nixon out, the IRS, just very basic stuff.
Well, I would disagree.
Just hear me out. Hear me out on this one, Mike.
Okay.
I mean, he has brought us to the brink of World War III, and we are sitting around debating. Fast and Furious, Benghazi, got an American ambassador killed. Drones, something like 20,000 airstrikes, constantly, no accountability. Immigration, his fiscal policy, his economic policy, everything about this man, it has been horrible. I'm black. I have the blood of the founding fathers flowing through my veins. I have the blood of the slaves flowing through my veins. I mean, it really pains me to say this. But if you look at the massive prison program, you look at NDAA, he signed those. He signed the Patriot Act. He extended the Patriot Act. Secret kill list. Libya. He gave immunity to Bush. I mean, it's been absolutely horrible, and no one wants to say it. And I think, as long as you have small fringe groups that sort of pay tribute to people like Sharpton, Jackson, Farrakhan, whatever, many of the people that have sort of racial agendas to sort of polarize masses of people. And as long as these people are out there, and you've got these people on both sides of the political aisle, Rush Limbaugh, and, people that sort of divide Americans into these neat little categories. And we're just going to constantly have this problem. And even with the collapse of the United States, like you always say, we're definitely going to have carpetbaggers. You're going to have people that are going to come out, and it's going to be so easy to rile the people into these neat little groups.
I disagree, and I'm going to cut you.
You've got to impeach them.
I agree with you on that. I'm going to cut you off here because we're running out of time here, and I want to respond to several things that you said. First of all, I don't think race comes into it because, first of all, this nation, at least we are told, this nation did elect our first black president. And criticism of Obama is really based on what he has done. And yes, the economy was down in the Al-Qaeda when he took office. But he won that office making promises he was going to change the policies of his predecessors, and he did not. Now, the American people really have very little say about the process of impeachment. Most polls are showing the majority of Americans want him impeached and gone from office. Of course, when you realize that'll put Biden in control of the government, it's not really much of an improvement. In fact, I think all modern presidents make a policy of picking a vice president who is so onerous to the general public as a deterrent to impeachment. But impeachment has to be done in the House of Representatives, and then the Senate must convict and remove from office. And right now, our entire Congress is so compromised by financial interests and by Israel, they simply lack the spine to do their job. And so if we're looking for somebody to blame because Obama has not been impeached, the blame falls squarely on the Congress of the United States of America. And I don't think the American people share any of the blame of that at all, because for decades the American people have been shouting to this supposedly representative governing body about a majority of issues. And Congress goes ahead and does what is in their own best interest. I think TARP is a stellar example. 90% of Americans were saying, do not use public money to save Wall Street from the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Congress went ahead and did it anyway because their own investment portfolios were involved. So they get the blame, not the American people. Now, as far as trying to keep Americans divided and fighting against themselves, it's a very well-worn old tactic, and for a lot of decades it actually did work. Back in the 60s, where you had the FBI trying to keep the blacks and the whites angry with each other, the feminists angry with the men, the young against the old, the gays against the straight. But it doesn't really work much longer, again, because the American people understand this is what the government does to keep us under control, to keep us quarreling amongst ourselves so we don't recognize we are a single American people of all genders, orientations, colors, and faiths, and that we share a common problem, which is this predatory private central bank and a government that is in their hip pocket, looting the population here. And we're seeing that more and more. And again, we're seeing in the foreign press praise heaped on the American people for standing up as an American people and saying we do not buy this lie about Assad gassing his own people. And we will not support a new war, and just, along with Vladimir Putin, just yanked the rug out of the warmongers, which doesn't mean they're not going to try some other tactic. But I really do think that those old methods of governing through fraud, deception, and guile, they just don't work any longer. And the longer our corporate media and our government persist in playing the game by the rules that worked at the height of the Cold War in the 1950s and 1960s, they're dooming themselves to complete and utter failure. And there is only one way to save our current government and financial system, and that is to come clean and say, yeah, we've been doing all this stuff for a couple of hundred years. We realize you, the American people, are onto the fraud, and we are going to not do those things any longer. We're going to go back to government-issued currency. We're going to go back to transparency and truth and ruling by persuasion rather than coercion and lies and deception. Did we ever get Jerry in Chicago back on the line?
No, he dropped.
He dropped. All right, we're coming up on the top of the hour. All righty, let's see. Now, Senator Sanders, fresh from having gotten the government a brand new credit card with apparently no limit on it, Senator Sanders is up on the floor saying global warming is a far more serious problem than Al-Qaeda, and he's out there saying we have got to just deal with global warming and climate change. And the translation of that is very simple. If we can't get your cash with Obamacare, and that's clearly failing, they're going to get it with carbon taxes. I guarantee you, even as we have this crippling hard winter settle across the northern hemisphere, they're going to come back and scream climate change, global warming, you must pay carbon taxes, because this government is desperate to take more money from you any way they can. And they were hoping to do it with Obamacare, and they moved too quickly with this completely botched up computer system, and so now they're going to fall back. Global warming, global warming, global warming. And the science is catching up with them, because now there is a new study out. Remember how they were saying Greenland is going to lose all of its ice, it's all warming and everything like that. And now it turns out the actual hard data is that since 1940, Greenland has been cooling. It's getting colder. And remember, one of the stars of the global warming cult, the Greenpeace leader Gerd Leopold, was out there saying Greenland will lose all of its ice in 20 years, and he got called on it on TV. And he basically had to say, well, yeah, we're having to scare people into doing the right thing, meaning give them your obedience and your money. And it's just not coming out there, but they're still pushing on this thing because it's shortest path to more money from your pocket into their pocket into the banker's pocket. This government is at the end of its rope financially, and their only solution is always take something more away from the American people. And you have the right and the freedom to say no. We'll be back after Phyllis Shapley and commercials with the lovely Lady Claire. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And Fox News is now running this program about how the nation's debt, meaning the government debt, has crossed $17 trillion for the first time ever.
Oh, yeah.
And we know it's a complete, fraud, because the actual financial obligations of the U.S. federal government are up around $220 trillion. Unfunded mandates, all these other programs going on. This is just the official debt. It's like the official unemployment numbers. It's a joke here. Anyway, for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this most splendiferous female creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who joins us every Friday in the third hour with her unique perspective on the world. And what is your first topic?
Well, I'd like to speak a little bit about Iran and some things going on here. And apparently there are some details which are emerging of Iran's nuclear proposal that they are presenting to the P5+1. Now, some of these elements were known and have been discussed, but some of them not so much. Under the plan that the Iranian negotiators are presenting, Iran would agree to a full stop, let me say that again, a full stop of its 20% uranium enrichment and convert all of its existing stock to fuel rods for the Tehran Research Reactor, which is a U.S.-built medical isotope reactor. All enrichment at Fordo would end, and the underground facility would be converted into a research center. The Natanz would remain open for enrichment. There is still some negotiation about the level and scope of that enrichment. And to me, Michael, this sounds like a very intelligent negotiation on the part of Iran. But
it's a very reasonable offer here, but of course the U.S. and Israeli position from the start is you shut it all down, tear it all down, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. Iran's position is, if you're so concerned about the 20% enriched uranium, we will ship that out of the country. We will not enrich to 20%, and you in exchange will, cancel all of these sanctions. And of course the U.S. is saying, no, you give us what we want first, and then we'll decide if we'll give you something nice. Now, I want to underscore something very critical here. Nuclear weapons require uranium enriched to better than 95%. 20% is not even close. These uranium centrifuges, it's not like a blender where you can take the button from chop to puree. In order to go from 20% to 95% involves a vast increase in the size of the facility. For anybody who understands how these processes work, this idea that 20% enriched uranium from medical isotope production represents the last step before a nuclear weapon is complete nonsense. They are counting on you being uneducated and unaware and just accepting what they tell you blindly, which we know you don't do anymore. Plus, again, Iran has been playing by the rules of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which they have signed and ratified, and the United States has signed and ratified. They allow full IAEA inspections, and so far nobody has found any evidence at all of diversion of nuclear materials to a weapons program. Everything that Iran has is accounted for. The IAEA knows where it is. All of these allegations that Iran is a nuclear threat to the United States of America are innuendo, rumor, and accusations without a shred of proof. And just common sense, people. Mm-hmm. Even if Iran had a nuclear bomb, what are they going to do with it? March it down the street in a parade and say, ooh, we're Butch. Put it in a museum for people to admire. They are not going to attack Israel, which is the world's 6th or 4th largest nuclear power, depending upon who you're talking to. They're certainly not going to attack the United States of America, which is the world's largest nuclear power. Boy, they're low over our roof today.
Yeah.
I'm only worried about the ones with guys in black Nomex dangling on ropes underneath.
Well, dear, that hasn't really happened yet.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Anyway, but getting back to the situation with Iran, this really isn't about Iran's nuclear weapons, just like Iraq was not about Iraq's nuclear weapons, which turned out to be another lie. It's about invading and conquering nations so that those nations are forced to sell their resources only for U.S. dollars. It's about placating Israel and keeping them the regional power, which they already are, but can't quite get comfortable with that. And it's about forcing private central banking on the entire world. Like we said earlier in the show, the current head of the Rothschild banking family is now proclaiming there will be a global currency in 5 years' time, and like the Federal Reserve note and like the euro, it'll be a currency that one must borrow at interest from the Rothschild bank to engage in any commerce. It's exactly the same kind of banking system this nation fought a revolution to be free of.
Right. And another issue about Iran that I thought was interesting, there has been an announcement by the Russian government that they're going to be deploying combat helicopters at an Armenian base in Yerevan. And Colonel Alexander Petrov, this is coming from Russia Today, made the statement, a decision has been made to form a helicopter squadron in addition to the fighter squadron at the Erebuni base by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. And I think we kind of need to take a look at a map, both in terms of the location where this chopper squadron is being forward-based, and look a little bit at the timing. And my sense is that Russia is hedging its bets that the U.S. and Israel are going to find some reason to cause the P5+1 talks to go absolutely south and to collapse.
Well, they've already found it. I mean, Israel and the U.S., their attitude is basically Iran has to completely get rid of all their nuclear infrastructure before any sanctions are lifted, and that's a non-starter for Iran.
Yeah.
Iran is legally allowed under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to have peaceful uses of nuclear technology. They've got one power station running. They've already contracted with Russia to build a second one. Medical isotopes, industrial applications. They're not going to just throw away that entire incredible investment. And in any event, even if they did, the U.S. would find some other way to start the war, because this is not about Iran's nuclear technology. It is about a war to reimpose Bretton Woods on the entire globe. And Russia knows what the real agenda is.
And the interesting thing, and every time you hear about a country forward-basing somewhere else, it's always instructive to get out a map and find out where that country is. Armenia is on the border with Iran. Now, I don't know how many hours it takes for a combat chopper to get from Yerevan to Tehran, but my guess is going to be that it's not going to take all that long.
I would say more than likely that Russia is looking at Armenia as a possible alternative ground supply route, because remember, Russia has already told the United States, both through Secretaries of State Hillary Clinton and Secretary of State John Kerry, that if and when the United States goes into Iran, Russia will supply the other side with weapons and material and turn it into a new Vietnam and grind the United States down in a war of attrition. Russia has the economy to do that, and the U.S. does not. And so the U.S. is trying to cause trouble in Georgia and Ossetia to close off those tunnels coming through the Caucasus Mountains. The reason they're pushing so hard to keep a garrison in Afghanistan is to close off that possible land route. And it looks like Russia is getting ready to say, all right, we're going to go through Armenia to send in ground convoys, because supporting Iran by air is going to be hideously expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. But it looks as though Putin is putting the chess pieces into place.
All right, we're going to grab a real quick phone call here before the commercial break. Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just wanted to say how disappointed I am in you and your judgment on bringing John McAfee on your show yesterday. We do
All right,
know.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Like I said, the furlough is over and the troublemaker calls are starting back up again.
Yes.
All righty. What is the next topic that you want to get onto?
The next topic I'd like to talk about, which has received, as far as I'm aware, virtually zero coverage from the prostitutes, is that the force feeding at Gitmo could end if Shakar Amir wins his appeal case. Now, Shakar Amir is a Saudi citizen and the last British resident held by the U.S. in the Guantanamo Bay detention camps in Cuba.
Okay, we got to take a break for commercials,
okay.
So just hold that thought.
All right.
And formulate your thoughts, and
yes.
we'll be back after these few commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and if you would just pick up where you kind of left off.
Right. We were talking about the possibility that the Gitmo force feeding could end if Shakar Amir wins his case. And if it's won, it could end all force feeding at the prison. The lawsuit alleges 2 human rights violations at Gitmo. First, force feeding of hunger-striking detainees in order to prolong their indefinite detention. And secondly, deprivation of religious free exercise by denying hunger strikers the right to pray in congregation.
Now, there's another point to keep in mind here, and that is even the military tribunal, the kangaroo court, set up to justify kidnapping and imprisoning these people without normal due process, has said most of these people have done nothing wrong to the United States and should be released, and the Obama administration refuses to release them.
Of course they refuse to release them because waterboarding was not the worst that was done to many of them.
That's right.
Illicit confessions.
They're a political embarrassment. They're a war crime. This government is committing war crimes, and they're acting like the war criminal. We're just going to cover it up. We're going to do what we're going to do. Speaking of war crimes, and this just came in here. Apparently, on a different topic, that woman from Connecticut, Miriam Carey, who was just gunned down in front of the Congress after, we're being told, ramming the barricade at the White House, even though the front of her car did not appear to have any damage. And she was apparently gunned down after she had stopped and gotten out of the car. The family hired a lawyer to find out what's going on and why they're not being allowed to look at the body. That lawyer has just been arrested, supposedly for an accumulation of missed court dates going back a couple of years, and they've thrown him in jail with something like a $500,000 bond.
That sounds so bogus to me.
I don't think this is a coincidence that just when he's getting ready to put this lawsuit together, oh, wow, we've got all these violations. You know, the Soviet Union used to operate that way. The laws were written such that you could not live your life without breaking some law somewhere, which gave the government an excuse to come after you anytime they felt they needed to. And that looks like what's going on here. What's next on your list?
Next on my list is there has been a study that's come out that poor children are now the majority in American public schools, particularly in the South and the West, and how they came to the analysis was based on the number of students from preschool through 12th who were eligible for the federal free and reduced price meal programs in the 2010-2011 school year. Children from those low-income families dominated classrooms in 13 states in the South, and the 4 western states were the largest population in 2011. And a decade earlier, just 4 states reported poor children as the majority of the student population. But, Michael, as of 2011, almost half of the nation's 50 million public school students, 48%, qualified for free or reduced price meals.
That's pretty shameful, along with the food stamp numbers and the rest of it. And of course, we know what's going to come out of the corporate media. Oh, those poor people, they deserve to be poor. They're lazy. They won't get jobs. There are no jobs for them to go to, especially with the flood of illegal aliens coming into this country. By the way, we were talking the other day about this tendency for a lot of people, including a lot of independent media, to dismiss the food challenged, the hungry and homeless as somehow deserving of their fate. And I was thinking about that the other night, and I realized that for a lot of Americans, their way of dealing with the insecurity of their own precarious financial situation is to go on convincing themselves that these other people who've already lost their homes and jobs and businesses somehow deserved it, and that as long as I go on filling out the paperwork and doing as I'm told, that these bad things will not happen to me. But you know something? Claire and I work with a lot of these people. And we deal with people who've lost their homes, lost their businesses, lost their jobs, who also thought that as long as they did as they were told, filled out all the paperwork, nothing bad would happen to them. And I think this bashing of the people who are bearing the brunt of the economic mismanagement of this nation is coming from people who are just trying to reassure themselves that it can't possibly happen to them. But yeah, it's on your way. This government has stopped looting the working class and poor of this country because there's nothing left there. Who are they going to come after next? The upper middle class, because you guys got money. And this government is desperate.
And in terms of the states with the most prevalent rates of childhood poverty based on the need of these kids for assisted food programs, New Mexico school kids have a 56% poverty rate, Louisiana 50%, Mississippi 63%, yikes, and Tennessee at 51%. And these numbers are depressingly, astoundingly bad, Michael.
They are very much so. This elementary school, that's one of the food programs we're involved in. What did they say the percentage of food-challenged children they had enrolled there? Wasn't it something like 47%?
Almost 50%. It's real close to the national average. And poverty is inextricably linked to learning problems at school. And what I have to wonder, Michael, is what is going to happen to these kids when they're of the age when people are starting their careers, et cetera, et cetera. And, I mean, with decent-paying jobs at a premium in this country, where are they going to go unless they are drafted into the military? Maybe that's the plan all along.
Well, yeah, it's an economic draft. Remember when we were down there when we found out the Denny's had closed?
Yes.
At the bottom of the hill, and there was all the recruiting offices there, and there was that whole bunch of kids there who were waiting to be put on the bus to be taken off to fight for our country, and we were talking to them, and they all said the same thing. They just gotten out of school, there were no jobs, and it was literally a choice, join the military or be homeless, so they joined the military. And that it's an economic draft, so the government can say, well, we didn't bring back the draft, but they so ordered the economy that it's driving the young people to serve in the military because there isn't anything else out there. All the high-paying jobs these kids should get have been offshored to other countries.
But please don't forget, Representative Charlie Rangel has introduced legislation this year to bring back the draft. And this time, they're not going to be coming just for your sons. They're going to be coming for your daughters as well.
And I think it was actually introduced a while back, but it's been sitting in committee. It's on the desk. When the next big bang happens, it'll go right to the floor of the Congress and be passed immediately.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
The next topic I'd like to go to is a number that when I first looked at it, I thought, this can't be. But it is. Illegal Israeli settlement construction rose by 70% in 2013. 70%. That is one heck of a lot of illegal construction on the part of Israel. And you've got Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that illegal Jewish settlements in occupied Palestine territory is a bogus issue, and they don't stand in the way of a peaceful solution. Don't stand in the way, my astrolabe. I mean, come on, guy.
Because, when somebody comes in and bulldozes your home, you shouldn't feel, any hostility toward them from that. It shouldn't get in the way of your coming to an agreement for them to come in and bulldoze more of your homes.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this earlier in the show. The propaganda that we're seeing coming out of Israel is almost reaching the point of laughability, whether it's that, Jewish land loss and this idea where Netanyahu is saying just the fact that we're taking away their lands and homes is no reason for them not to agree to the peace process. It's absurd, and Netanyahu is still operating in the mindset of an age where Israel could say whatever they wanted to say, count on the American media to regurgitate it to you, and you, the American people, would believe it rather than risk being called an anti-Semite, whether it was Levant Affair, USS Liberty, reasons to go into Lebanon, reasons to go into Gaza, but those days are gone forever.
Absolutely.
All right, we're coming up on another commercial break here, And we're going to be coming back and talking about a few other things here. By the way, real quick, because we got a few minutes, probably over this last summer, you saw the corporate media just broadcasting every time the thermometer went over 100 degrees as proof of human-caused global warming. This last year, the U.S. had the fewest recorded 100-degree readings of any year in the past century, only 1/6 as many as 1936. We'll be right back. Aloha, welcome back to the show. A couple of quick headlines before we get back to Claire here. Fox News is now trumpeting that a new study finds that rapid expansion of the food stamp program is not justified because we need to spend the money on bombs and Wall Street and Israel and so forth and so on. Now, over in Great Britain, they have what's called a D notice. Both the British government and the U.S. government keep tight control over the corporate media, but in Great Britain it's a little more open and honest about it, where they'll say, we're issuing a D notice, and this story is now officially dead, whereas in the United States, somebody calls somebody, and the story gets spiked before it ever gets published here. And apparently, a British court has issued a D notice against the Wall Street Journal regarding their story on the rigging of the LIBOR rate. Because apparently all those ordinary people whose finances were impacted negatively by the rigging of LIBOR, it's really not necessary for them to know why their pension investments didn't pay off the way they were supposed to, or why the interest rates on their car loans and mortgages and everything were higher than they were supposed to be. People don't need to know those things, really. What is your next topic, Claire?
Next topic, there are two topics, but they are linked. The NSA director, Keith Alexander, and his deputy are expected to depart in early 2014. And before we get into, yay, they're gone, they're gone, they're gone, I would like people not to expect for 1 second that President Obama will, quote-unquote, reshape the agency by making it less intrusive and more transparent. I would bet that given Obama's penchant for secrecy and control,
paranoia.
Yeah, and paranoia. Expect this agency to become even more egregious in its callous disregard for the Constitution and Bill of Rights in the name of alleged security, which it cannot deliver, Michael. It just flat can't.
No, it's all about spying on Americans to make sure that you're not thinking the bad thoughts.
Right.
Because bad thoughts will get you punished by the thought police.
Yes, definitely. And the other related situation is that President Obama has nominated a gentleman by the name of Jay Johnson to replace Janet Napolitano, who is now with the U.S. university system. Now, this is the guy who thinks extrajudicial bombing and drone strikes are perfectly logical.
Including of American citizens.
Yes.
Apparently, he's like a huge Obama campaign donor, and somebody in the Senate's kicking up a fuss about whether this guy really has the qualifications to be running DHS, but the fact that he's perfectly okay with drone striking American citizens is cause for extreme alarm.
Well, when I posted this, I said, if he does get confirmed, you may well start seeing extrajudicial assassinations and drone strikes right here in the United States. And the reason I have for stating that is that what is the far leap of logic for Obama to believe that he has the judicial and moral backing to kill indiscriminately overseas? How far of a leap of logic is that? To think that he has the authority to kill any American here right in the United States.
Well, the UN has already said these foreign drone strikes are violations of international law. The President, the administration, the entire federal government are committing war crimes left and right. We know there's a lot of covert assassination going on, Michael Hastings being a really good example about that. How much, they get pushed to where making it over to try and send a message to the American people. Don't you dare say bad things about the way the country is being run, or your home will vanish in a blinding flash of light, and the corporate media will claim it was a gas main explosion. And by the way, we don't have gas in this building, just so that you know ahead of time.
Because in looking at the legislation from the previous administration and the current administration, between the Patriot Act, the Homeland Security Act, and the signing of the NDAA, which allows indefinite detainment of American citizens without due process, it feels to me like we have, the Constitution and Bill of Rights has just been knocked on its backside by these two administrations.
Barack, Uber, Alice, you know. Like I said, that digital billboard where they had Obama with the mustache and they took it down proves the point the billboard was making.
Yeah. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's a very serious, painful situation. And what are we going to do, Michael? What are we going to do to restore?
Well, pull back.
Yep.
De-link, get your money out of the bank, be prepared to deal with 3 months of turmoil, just stand. It's all going to come crashing down. Because even the corporate media is saying this debt ceiling deal didn't even look at the real problems that have brought the nation to this point.
Yeah.
And even though they now have an open-ended credit card to borrow and spend for the next couple of months, what are they spending it on? They're more wars. They want to go back into Syria, want to go back into Iran. They're already here. Oh, we've got to cut back on food stamps here. We're on a wartime economy, but they won't admit it.
Yeah. And if any of you ever came to Oahu and saw the families we try to help, we have once a month we volunteer to help out from my church and the local Catholic Church. I was told that the last time this happened...
I'd like to clarify. Yes. Our involvement in the food programs is pretty much ongoing throughout the entire month.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody involved takes turns going to the actual food distribution, and that occurs about once a month for us.
And, you know, if you saw some of these people and talked with them, it would break your heart. You know. And
they don't deserve to be there.
No, they don't.
The overwhelming majority of these people are not lazy.
No.
They're not gaming the system.
Not
They're
at
not
all.
trying to cheat the system. These are people who are just like you, who used to have high-paying jobs, who went to school, went into debt to college, student loans, to get those high-paying jobs, ran businesses that have all fallen victim to this fascist economic dictatorship that has descended over this country and its economy.
And I will never forget one of the times we volunteered before. There was a young lady there who was very obviously expecting. And I remember thinking, is this, and forgive me for calling her a kid, because I'm in my 60s, so everyone younger than that is pretty much a kid.
Everybody's a kid in our eyes. You know.
And I was wondering, is this kid getting prenatal care? Does she know to take prenatal vitamins to cut the risk of neural tube damage? And my sense was no, you know. And I think a society needs to be judged by how it treats its most fragile members. And there's a lot of fragility right here that has been deliberately created by this government.
Yeah, but Frank Lautenbach's widow gets a $175,000 bonus from this debt ceiling deal, even though she is now worth $60 million with the passing of her husband. I mean, that's how completely screwed up the priorities of this nation are.
What that amount of money could have done for any food program in the United States, and they're all really fighting to help save the most fragile of our citizens. And you've got that, and then you've got something else. It's related. And, okay, Obama saved General Motors from bankruptcy. Yes, when he ran for re-election last year, and Democrats everywhere touted the company's revival as proof of the bailout's wisdom. Well, now, Obama has quietly released the auto manufacturer from a bailout requirement that it increase its production in the U.S. Instead, GM is, drumroll please, spending billions of dollars building up its production capability in China. Did the American people get really messed over on this? Heck yes.
Well, we did, and we see, you know, and again, what we were talking with John McAfee yesterday, this $600 million project for the Obamacare website. And by the way, a member just put up a story at whatreallyhappened.com saying top tech experts are all saying the same thing that we were saying. It can't be fixed. It needs to be restarted from scratch. Where did the money go? Went up to a major Obama donor in Canada. Who shopped most of the actual work over to sweatshop programming shops in India and didn't bother managing them carefully. McAfee has got copies of these memos coming back from the programmers in India saying, please explain what this is supposed to be. Tell us what these variables and the data structures are supposed to be. And you know, huge amounts of money handed out to cronies for which we the people don't get much benefit. And there are IT people in this country who are very well qualified, very well trained. They didn't get a piece of that project.
Not one. But I'd like to go back to the story about Chrysler. Am I hearing the music?
No,
oh, okay.
Not yet.
This is happening despite the fact that the Treasury Department has to date recovered just $36 billion of its original $51 billion loan to GM. And by most analysts' predictions, American taxpayers are going to be out about $10 billion when the remaining stock is sold off, which is a long way of saying.
Well, there's a little scam there because GM has been repaying its earlier bailouts using the later bailouts. They're running their own little Ponzi scheme. We got to take a break for commercials.
Okay.
We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. And I know we've got a caller waiting on the line, but Scott, if you could wait for a minute, Claire's got one more story she wants to cover.
Well, I noticed today with some degree of alarm that the Pentagon is going to sell bunker busters cruise missiles to a couple of Gulf monarchies in an $11 billion deal. And they're planning to sell $10.8 billion worth of advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia and UAE. Bunker busters, cruise missiles, etc., etc. And my question is, forgive me, but against whom are these weapons intended to be used in the region? Michael?
Well, proxy war against Iran, maybe to make Israel nervous and a little more obedient. But actually, this appears to be part of a larger program because apparently on Tuesday, Barack Obama signed the Export Reform Initiative, which basically further deregulates U.S. arms exports around the world, which, of course, human rights activists, peace activists are saying this is just going to have serious consequences as countries are going to line up to buy American weapons. Maybe if we're lucky, they'll buy the F-35 and peace will break out. But, it's just getting the weapons out there. I mean, of course, the U.S., they're handing free guns to the drug criminals in Mexico. They're selling weapons to anybody around the world who wants them, but you're going to have to fill out a piece of paperwork to buy bullets inside the United States of America.
Yeah, the irony is a little more than delicious.
It is. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha to Sister Claire and to you, Michael. Michael, I was listening to you today, and I just couldn't resist calling in to get a jab before the Aloha weekend. Mike, let's go back over the situation that you've been talking about, the economics, and I love you to keep when you stress on this because, it goes back again. I want to reiterate this to the American people of where we come from real quick to where we're at. Number one, you attack the small farmers. I was looking back a few years back, Mikey. I've seen 35,000 small private farmers gone.
Oh, that's awful.
Attack the big corporations. It's gone. Look at go up to Detroit. Then you go, Mikey, to the AIGs. Remember how many times they bailed out AIG? That was a federal insurance thing.
Oh yeah.
And what I heard the last time, they took the money and they were out west partying on it.
Oh yeah, it's just it's a big party on Wall Street. They just do whatever they want. They're never going to get arrested. They're never going to get prosecuted. That was set as U.S. government policy back in 2008. This whole idea of TARP was we were going to take $1 trillion away from the American people and give it to Wall Street so Wall Street could turn around and loan it back to the American people at interest. Such a deal. And most of Wall Street just wrote themselves huge, gigantic bonuses and put the money in their pocket. It's completely out of control.
Exactly.
It's not serving the public interest. It's not serving the people. It's not serving the nation. They are simply serving themselves. We have a coffee cup we sell over at our online store that says, the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. We're there. We are there right now. That's what's going on. The money junkies and the politicians are strip mining the wealth of this nation to put in their pocket before they skedaddle for the border.
Yeah, that's right, Mike, and I'll finish up here. It goes back into what you were just talking about, the housing swap. They destroyed the housing. Then they go and try it on the car and destroy. You guys bring your first-time car and get a new one. Then let's go talk about the college loans. The American dream is over for those kids. We talked about a while back that it was $1 trillion in the red, Mike. And then you go and look at them. Now they're going down to the private sector. First attack the federal programs, Mikey. Then let's go down and attack the small business and now the private insurance. And see, I'll finish off with this. When that housing swap, not only did that destroy the housing, but it put the American people's savings in 401ks gone.
Yeah, it absolutely did because.
And you're exactly right. You're exactly right, Mike. They're going to go now because the middle-class cardiac kid is almost dead. They're going to start going to the wealthy people, and people, you better wake up because you're going to be joining the street side down the road. Thanks, Mikey, for letting me talk. Aloha, Claire and Mike, and have a good, joyful, peaceful, and safe weekend.
Aloha.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott, here. All right, we're coming up on the top of the show here, and again, I had a lot more stuff that I wanted to get to real quick. As you're probably aware, we just had this monster snowstorm in South Dakota that froze 100,000 cattle to death. They were caught completely off guard by the severity of it. They got more snow in the space of 4 days than they normally get in the entire month of October. Al Gore apparently came out basically saying, well, yeah, it was a hard snowstorm, but the winter will be shorter because of global warming. They're still out there pushing this stuff because they're desperate for money. They're greedy, and all they want is their money and their power, and they don't really care about you, and that is not what the United States is supposed to be. Mainstream media is still pushing global warming after the latest IPCC report. Dissenting views are not allowed. And they're still trying to sell that. And the reason is, it is becoming very apparent that the expected windfall of an additional $200 billion a year that was supposed to flow into federal coffers from Obamacare is not going to happen. They're actually spending more money per actual enrolled person than they're going to get from that elevated insurance premium. In other words, they're losing money hand over fist on this thing. They were expecting 100 million people would log in and sign up and the money would start flowing, and it's turned into a disaster. So what are they going to do? Well, they need to have other revenues to wave at potential lenders to the United States government. And now they're going to go back to global warming. We need a carbon tax. We've got to save planet Earth. You must give us your money. It is just another fraud. Because this government's solution to all of their self-created problems is to take more away from you to give to the bankers. And it's time for it to, and you know, because of that Ponzi scheme nature of the Federal Reserve issuing the public currency as a loan at interest, there's no way to pay it off. The debt is always greater than the available money supply. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how loyal an American you are. It doesn't matter how much you sacrifice or your children or grandchildren. It can't be paid off. The only solution is to shut it down like Andrew Jackson did. To go back to government-issued currency, the public currency as a public utility like Abraham Lincoln did and John F. Kennedy did. And by the way, I was reminded the other day that Presidents McKinley and Garfield were pushing for a gold standard and debt-free money when they were shot. So we're up there on the edge. Now, I want to, one more time, go back to this question, because everybody's still talking about debt ceiling, and now, of course, they've kicked the can into the first part of next year, which gives us a couple of months to get this question before the American people. And that is, the Constitution grants the government the authority to create and issue debt-free money. Why then is this government borrowing money at interest from a privately owned central bank, thereby plunging the nation into this debt crisis and condemning future generations of Americans to debt slavery? That's not how the nation was started. It is not what America is supposed to be. This is a question every American ought to be asking. This is the question the Federal Reserve and the federal government and the corporate media don't want asked because they don't really have a good answer for it. It's just a money-making scam for the bankers. And the only reason we're in this mess is because the U.S. federal government has sold us into the slavery of these private bankers not once but 3 times. And all 3 times have brought this nation to the edge of ruination. So they can't claim that they didn't know back in 1913 what was going to happen when they went along with this again. And remember, President Woodrow Wilson wrote in his own diary after signing the Federal Reserve Act, "I have unwittingly ruined my own nation." He knew what he did when he did it. He knew what the consequences were going to be. And he did it anyway, because that was the price to get that Oval Office. We've made that Oval Office and that Capitol building way too attractive. And, of course, the Founding Fathers wanted it the other way. The power and authority was supposed to be, the states were supposed to reign supreme. The federal government was just an umpire, a referee, a little black and white striped shirt and a whistle. That was the federal government's original job. When you make power too attractive, it attracts the wrong sort of people.
It's almost like a religious cult, if you will.
Oh, yeah, it's very much caught up in their belief system that they're supposed to be there, that they're supposed to be rich, everyone else is supposed to be poor, and nobody's ever supposed to ask questions. There's our music. It is time for Claire and I to get the heck out of here, and we will be back on Monday talking about all kinds of things. Mazie Hirono, senator from Hawaii, boy, we're gonna whip on her a little bit on Monday's show. We'll be back, and aloha, America.